Hello, my name is Rishi Dave. I am the Chief Marketing Officer of Dun & Bradstreet, and very excited to be here today. The most important thing is my Twitter handle, which I was not able to get in this kind of standard format. So my Twitter handle is RISHIPDAVE. That's the most important thing. I want to make sure you all follow me. This is my entire presentation in written form. So if you want to read it first before I get into it, that's fantastic. Great, so what I'm going to talk about today is really the role of customer intelligence in inbound marketing. What I really want to talk about today, though, is how the nature of the buying relationship has changed and the role that data and customer intelligence can play in that. So I want to start here. All of you know this iconic logo. Essentially no software. Now, we all know that actually Salesforce.com is a software company. But when they came on the scene, they put this logo up to be provocative and to indicate to everyone that the fundamental nature of selling software has changed forever. And so, I want to challenge all of you in this presentation to think of data the same way. So what I mean by that is it's no longer about the data. What it's really about is how are you driving your relationships with your customers. And really what it's about is the nature of that customer relationship has fundamentally changed, and marketers are at the center of that change. And what I'm seeing today is no matter how good we are with our data and our models and all that type of stuff, we still execute the creative, the content, that relationship piece from that data in a very traditional way. And so I want to challenge all of you to think about this in the context of how are you using your data to fundamentally react to the changing nature of your buyer. And that's really about inbound marketing, and that's really what I'm going to focus on today. And I will leave a lot of time at the end for questions. So as I mentioned, 85%, 90% of what you do today in Salesforce is about managing relationships. The fundamental problem is the nature of how customers buy today has changed drastically. So, in the old world, which most of us are still operating in, when a customer has a problem or a pain, they call up their salesperson. They had very limited places to go to get information to solve their problems, except their salesperson, and they generally went to the big names, the big brands, et cetera. And they would talk to their salesperson. The salesperson would be expertly trained. They would know how to assess the pain, uncover the issues, have the discussion, and really take them from understanding the pain all the way to close, all the way to revenue. And that was basically the way buying happened. And most of us are still operating in that mode, which is wrong. Today, given that buyers have lots of places they can go, whether it's social, bloggers, influencers, going directly to your website, looking at content, et cetera, they have a multitude of places to go, and they kind of no longer go directly to the sales rep. In fact, if you actually look at the data, a typical buyer is 60% of the way down the buying process before they even engage with the brand. So how many of you have seen this data? This is like going viral. OK, awesome. So the issue becomes, if they're 60% of the way down, what do? We have to make sure that when they're self-nurturing in digital, during that 60% phase, they're nurturing with us, and they're looking at our content, and looking at our perspective, and looking at our brand, and not somebody else's. And we have to make sure that when they're talking to influencers, talking to bloggers, reading their content, we have our perspective in that process. So that's a fundamentally different way to approach what you do with your customers and how you use your customer data. So very different. So again, old world, go directly to the salesperson does most of the work. New world, customer self-nurtures wherever they want, and then kind of goes to and the salespeople basically close. Right? They kind of take the customer who's been self-nurtured, who's been guided by marketing, and they basically close. This also massively changes the economics of how you manage your customers and how you use your customer data. Because again, if you are actually in digital and through the marketing group actually nurturing the customer, you can massively scale those relationships. As well, if the sales team is focusing on that last bit, that last 40%, they become massively more productive. And they don't have to cold call anymore, right? Because that's what marketing does in terms of acquiring customers. So it is a very different approach that we have now in terms of how we work with customers. So what does that mean in terms of how we actually approach this and how we actually react to this? If you look at it, there's really 4 main components to manage this kind of 60% type relationship. The number one is something that there's about 15 sessions here at Dreamforce on this topic, which is how do you collect, how do you integrate, how do you clean, how do you use your data so that you have that 360 view. And clearly, I had a whole section on this, but I kind of brought it down because there's a lot of sessions on this topic. The second piece is, once you have that, how do you build your models to actually react to what the data is telling you? The third one, and this is actually the most important piece, is what experience do you architect based on this new buying behavior, as well as what the data is telling you. And that's a combination of content, influencer management, digital content experiences, physical experiences in events and things like that. And that's really where things have fundamentally changed. Because it's not just about the data, it's not just about the science, it's not just about the algorithms, it's actually more so about how you architect the experience, how you architect the content, and how do you make sure you hit your customer with the right information, content, et cetera, at the right time, depending on where they are in the journey and depending on who they are. And obviously the last piece, which is actually quite different as well, is how do you measure and how do you optimize that whole experience? So clearly, this is something that most people at Dreamforce spend a lot of time focusing on. And it actually is critically important, is how do you integrate your first-party data, the data that you generate, with third-party data, which is either data specific to your vertical or D&B data, et cetera, with social data, right? Social data is what I call kind of dark data, right? Dark matter. It's data that's not structured, data that you have to integrate into the overall customer journey, and then create that kind of 360 view of your customer. Now again, we have a lot of sessions at Dreamforce, and we have another one this afternoon, the Data.com keynote, that's going to talk a lot about how you actually do this. But it's very powerful, and a great example is that I talk on social all the time. That's why I gave you my Twitter handle, because I want you to all listen to me. I get almost at least 3 to 4 times a week. I have somebody, a vendor, a software company, et cetera, who contacts me and gives me a very direct, very personalized contact or piece of content or piece of information. And that's really the way that I've discovered a lot of the vendors that I work with, a lot of the software companies that I work with, a lot of the startups I work with, is through that process. And I've actually executed multi-million-dollar vendor deals that have come in through social because they've built that journey and they've looked at everything I've said in social and given a very personalized experience. And that's really what startups do today. The second one is, how do we take that data and how do we architect the right models against it? Now, when I say models, a lot of people kind of go to these really complicated, high-end, multivariate predictive models. And I would argue that that's kind of the last thing that you do, right? You don't need an PhD from, actually, some of you may actually have PhDs from MIT, but you don't need to build a model that requires a PhD from MIT. You really need to kind of say, when you've architected that journey, how do you decide simply what content you send to your customer, wherever they are in the process and whoever they are. And it's actually very simple. So if you have a target list of customers, when they come on, hit them with content, right? If you see them moving along the process, we all know using market automation, we hit them with content. But it's very important to keep it very simple and then get more sophisticated later on. I'm going to spend most of my time today talking about that creative piece, that content piece. Because again, there's a lot of sessions on how you clean your data, how you architect a journey, how you build models, et cetera. So this is where I see a lot of companies taking the wrong approach to leveraging their data to build these world-class relationships with their customers. So what happens today, typically, is that we build these models and then we execute campaigns. And the problem with campaigns is they have start times, they have end times, and they have basically one content creation point that happens. And the problem with that is that you basically spend a bunch of money, you get a bunch of leads, and then you kind of stop, right? And then you spend a bunch of money, get your legal team to approve a bunch of content, and then you stop. And typically, this is the pattern that we see a lot with a lot of companies when they use their data. And this is not how you build relationships with your customer. This is more like the model for an average American marriage, right? Marry, divorce, marry, divorce, marry, divorce, right? And that's what you're doing with your customers, right? You're marrying them, and then you're divorcing them, marrying them, then divorcing them, and marrying them, divorcing them. And the problem is that the economics don't work anymore because customers don't buy that way. You don't scale your costs. You don't get the productivity. You don't take advantage of the new buyer journey. So we really have to change the model and change the approach for how we actually use our data, use our customer intelligence to build those relationships. And this is the model that I know, that I love, and that I've executed and seen incredible economics. So essentially, you have this always-on connection with the customers, clearly. You want to just be pumping out content all the time. And you want to use the data to get the right content to the right customer at the right time. Now, why does this change the economics? It changes the economics because when you're pumping out content on a constant basis, multiple times a day, every single day, et cetera, you are actually creating that long-term relationship with the customer. And they keep coming back. And the reason why they keep coming back is they want more data. They want more content. They want more information to help them do their jobs better. And by the way, we all know, I know you guys know social, we all share the data, and we get additional people who come back to us. And you see this nice increasing scaling curve of people who are visiting your site, especially if you're hitting them with the right content with the data. And then obviously your spend starts to scale downward as well. Now, there's been a lot of successful implementations of this strategy. I'll take the one that's the oldest because, and you may all know this one, which is the Amex Open Forum. Right? I know a lot of you know about Amex Open Forum, but you talk to them, and so what Open Forum is, for those of you who don't know, is Amex really wanted to drive relationships with their small businesses. So instead of actually marketing to them in a campaign manner, they built a whole experience around helping small businesses succeed, right? Because they have a lot of pains. How do you manage inventory? How do you market? How do you sell? How do you lead your employees, et cetera? And so they started building a whole host of content, and they saw this exact economic result, where, especially when they started bringing the data around that changing relationship. And so what they saw was the percentage of customers who were coming in and buying cards was drastically increasing, and the amount that they were spending against those customers was drastically decreasing because they initially did a lot of media spend behind it in that old model, but over time, people kept coming back, and they kept seeing this nice lift. And by the way, the content had nothing to do with cards, obviously, but they went from that experience to Amex and actually bought cards. What's also interesting, another great example of this is Red Bull. Red Bull takes this whole concept to an extreme. So if you ask Red Bull what they do, they won't tell you they sell drinks. What they'll tell you is they say, look, we're a extreme sports media company, and instead of selling ads, we sell drinks to pay for that media. and the exact same economics, right? They spend money on content, but they get a massive amount of people who keep coming back to the site, and those people buy, right? They actually sell drinks, right? I launched a similar site called Tech Page One when I was at Dell before I joined Dun & Bradstreet. And again, we saw the same economics. We focused it on the IT buyer, and we saw the same economics. So it's a very powerful way to actually execute your marketing and take advantage of the new buying process. Typically, the question I get at this point is like, how do you do this, right? Because what's interesting is we spend a lot of money, a lot of effort, and a lot of people on the first two steps: getting the data, cleaning it, analyzing it, building these fancy models and all that. And we don't spend enough money actually using it to build that ongoing scalable relationship with the customer. And so what we need to do is really shift our thinking and shift our spend against this more scalable inbound strategy using the data. And so how do you do that? How do you scale up your content? How do you scale up your experiences? You kind of redefine what this even means, right? Again, old world, we spend all our money on kind of this high-end original content that our company creates. And it costs a bunch of money, and it's very hard to do, and it requires a lot of corralling experts and legal approvals, et cetera. What we really need to do is kind of just put content up there that we just think is good, no matter who writes it. So some will be original content, some will be commission content. Get those influencers who are talking to your customers, get them the right content for you. I recycle content all the time, where just take a bunch of blog posts, put them together, and call them an ebook. You'll be surprised how much more excitement you get around that than a blog post. And there's a lot of funny things you can do around that. You have to think about curating content. Just take other people's stuff and just push it back out to your customer. Or take other people's stuff and provide context around it and push it back out. Or just get a machine to do it for you. That's what aggregated content is. So there's a lot of different approaches you can take. Just make sure that you're using the data to hit the customer wherever they are in their journey, and you're kind of building that scalable model. Now, here's the most beautiful thing about the model, is that once you've kind of gotten this going and you've gotten this nice increasing scale, customers coming in, you're seeing your cost decline, here's the funny thing. You can actually give them an extremely overt sales message, and they will actually react to it. It's crazy, right? And the reason why is, we always talk about, oh, don't sell to the customer, don't be so overt about it, be more subtle, don't use banner ads, don't give offers. But in reality, when you've built this relationship with your customer and they're coming back and you're providing them the exact content they want and they're sharing it with all their friends and you've built this relationship over time, they give you complete permission to do whatever you want, right? So if you have an overt sales message, you can actually push them with that message. Or if you want to sell your product or you want to get them to come to your events, or you want to get them to do anything, be a case study, et cetera, you have full permission to do that because you're actually helping them and you've built that relationship. So it's a very critical way that you can use the data versus the traditional way, which most of us do, is we clean the data, we build the model, and then we kind of just do a bunch of paid media, right, and send a bunch of display ads. And here's the beautiful virtuous cycle that we create, all driven by this content and experience, et cetera, where you're constantly on every platform that your customer goes to. So this is what I call discovery platforms, whether it's a major blogger, a major influencer, somebody else's site, a review site, et cetera. You're constantly on there, and you want to bring them into your content. And you want to hit them with your content and your content platforms. And then you create that nice thing that I talked about where they keep coming back, they keep sharing your content, they love you. And then when they're ready to buy, and I misspelled nurture, when they're ready to buy, when they're at that 60% mark, then you can really capture them, and then you can nurture them and close them and kind of go through this process again. And so, once you've nailed this piece, then, we always talk about like high-end nurture campaigns and analytics and all that. Really, once you've built this amazing relationship with your customer, even if your landing forms are terrible and your nurture streams don't always work, like customers don't You've helped them so much here that this will all work out in the end because you've built that relationship with your customer, right? So it's all about that relationship that you've built by helping them, right? When they're in that digital nurture phase, just like a salesperson used to help them in the old world before digital. Now you're helping them in the digital space in the same way. And so they love you just like they used to love their sales rep. Some people from my sales team are here, some just like, and then, of course, measure and optimize. But the thing about measure and optimize is you look at this model, and you're measuring and optimizing very different things. You might be looking at sometimes the same data, but you're really looking at the relationships that you've architected in this model, in the 60% model. And you're trying to look at them and say, have I architected the right portfolio of relationships, right, based on what my corporate strategy is? So do I have the right combination of small businesses, medium businesses, businesses in this vertical, that vertical, et cetera? And can I use that to kind of predict, when they'll get to that 60% mark and be ready to be given to sales? And can I predict that out over 3, 4, 5, 6 quarters? And oh, by the way, if my mix is not right, then I better, go back and get that mix right that I've built in the cycle. And how do I do that? Change the portfolio of content that you've created. Change where you hit them. Change those where you go on those discovery platforms, what bloggers you work with, et cetera. You have to change that mix constantly with your sales team and with your corporate strategy team to make sure that you are constantly building the right set of relationships and you're maintaining those relationships in that more or less community. So that's what I would focus on and make sure that there's a clear action from that data clearly. At D&B, we play a big role in this. We're going to talk about it. I won't go into a huge amount of detail on this, given that we're going to be that there's a lot of sessions. We're very much in the middle of building this ability to create the 360 view of the customer, building the linkages among your customers, architecting that journey, and then letting you action on that data based on that journey. I don't know if it's a crazy idea, but it's an idea, which is, end of the day, it's all about this concept of data-powered relationships, right? Once you get that piece right around driving the right content, around constantly looking at the data and hitting them with the right content when they're in that 60% phase, everything else falls into place. And the data kind of guides you there, but it's all about that ecosystem that you're creating and how that's scaling and how your costs are scaling down. So it's really, end of the day, about that. And that's kind of the next place that we all need to look and move past simply looking at if our data is clean and and simply looking at the kind of basic stuff which we all know and love and we talk a lot about. We have to make sure we're using that to actually take advantage of the new buying process. So I left about 15 minutes for questions. So any questions?
There's, I think, kind of at the cornerstone of your value proposition is the right content.
Right, or the experience, yeah, yep.
The right experience.
Yeah.
What is the best place to start there?
Yep. Number one place to start is, are you a small company or a large company?
Very large.
Very large, okay. So number one place to start is your own employees. That's the number one place to start. Because clearly your employees are experts in the industry you're in. Your sales teams, your service employees are constantly talking to customers, so they have an idea of the pain points, et cetera. And so start with your employees and start creating the content that way, and then see what works based on the data and the type of people, right, that are coming in based on that content, and then kind of move outward from there, right? So once you kind of know what you want to focus on, then you may be able to bring in third-party experts, third-party platforms, et cetera, to really start scaling up. But you should start with your employees. They know more about your customers than anyone else.
And that could just be traditional kinds of VOC sessions and things of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I typically like to go with the sales rep who everyone knows is good and all the customers love, right? That works well as kind of your product people, your thought leaders. Those kind of folks are really good at that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And
thanks for breaking the ice.
And how does your answer change for small companies?
Same answer. No, small companies is actually even more pronounced. And the difference, I think, in small companies, although you should do this in big companies, but it's easier in small companies, is create micro-celebrity, right? Make them famous in whatever niche you're in. So let me give you an example. In a previous job, I was in tech in the virtualization space, and we took one of our super nerdy but really brilliant engineers, and we made him a celebrity in the specific, narrow, geeky space that he was in. And then we went to a conference, VMworld, which some of you may know, VMware puts it on. And this was like 3-4 years ago, and one of our, like the number 2 guy in the company gave a keynote, and I told him to mention this guy's name. And this guy's a mid-level to low-level engineer, although he wouldn't like me saying that. But he mentioned this guy's name, and this guy got a huge ovation, because this guy was pumping out great content. He was helping people when they had questions, whether it was related to what we did or not. He was like a celebrity. And so this guy became more well-known than the senior level guy at the company. And so you can create that micro-celebrity, and that's what you can spend a lot of time on. And then that's why I'm trying to be a micro-celebrity. That's why I want you guys to follow me on Twitter.
Similar to her question about small businesses.
Yep.
How do you motivate these micro celebrities to create content? Or you gave some really good tips on collecting content from other sources.
Yep.
It's just a challenge to get people to create their own.
Yep. So what I would do there is start with 1 or 2 people, or 1 person if you're a really small company. There's always somebody who kind of gets it, or is in social, or is whatever, and then you have to handhold that person initially. And so what I mean by handholding is like literally help them write the content, help them get in, give them the numbers on how many people are looking at it, all those kind of things. Really kind of focus in and handhold that person and walk them through the process. And then as that person gets success, and it takes time, then you can kind of move to the next person. It's not easy. You can't just say go into social because I'm allowing you to, and it doesn't just happen. You have to kind of work hard with that person to help that person succeed, and then show the numbers in terms of what they're actually generating.
Our company, we really try and drive content based upon essentially thought leadership is what we call it. And we do it based upon market segmentations in healthcare and in some of our core technology space. Do you think that what do you think about overdoing thought leadership? I think there has to be a tipping point where you say, okay, we're kind of over-talking in the market, and I think that could have negative impact on what you're trying to actually accomplish.
Yeah, I actually get that question a ton on social, actually. I have never actually seen somebody overdo thought leadership.
Come hang out at our company.
What's that?
I said, come hang out at our company.
Customers typically are starving for good content.
Right.
So, you have to make sure that it's also high quality. So you have to do that balance of volume versus quality, and how do you achieve both? So the question I would ask is it too much, or is the quality decreasing? Potentially, and that may be what it is. But I've never seen a company that truly said, we are pumping out way too much. I know this, I'm not trying to be funny, but we're pumping out way too much high quality thought leadership content to help our customers. And also, again, being very targeted about the content as well. So, again, think about the relationship piece, right? You maybe feel like you're pumping out a lot of content, but if you actually look at who's looking at it, if you're putting it in different channels and mixing it up based on the data and who the person is, and a single individual may not be inundated.
I think one of our problems is, and not to wait.
No, please.
No, I'm just making sure there's nobody.
No.
I'm just kidding. Is that we have too many individuals trying to be micro-celebrities. I think it's a balancing act there too.
I think you mean you have too many egos.
We're a 30-year-old company. We're privately held. We're incredibly profitable. But nobody really knows who we are. But we have tremendous individuals who, in their own right, are thought leaders in the industry. But now they're saying, well, okay, I want to do this webinar. I want to do this. I want to do this. Oh, let's turn this into a white paper.
Yep.
Like, that's a press release. It's not a white paper. You can't change the tag on it and throw it out the door.
Right.
And see, you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And,
No.
and I think for us as a company, it's trying to manage that, as well as, you know, this whole concept of being a thought leader. You know, maybe the better question is, how do you manage the egos?
Yes. So that's really, depends on how good of a people person you are. But managing egos is like, you have to do the like sports marketing, like celebrity agent model, right? Where they are celebrities, right? So you have to, essentially, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. One is clearly training is a big piece, right? So a lot of people want to be micro celebrities, but you can't just say you're allowed to go on social, do whatever you want, right? So a lot of times the training and the hand-holding, I cannot overemphasize the hand-holding piece, right? If you really feel like there's a set of people who are just smart people who customers could get benefit from, you really have to kind of micromanage the micro celebrities, just like just manage their egos, right? And you really have to kind of work with them and train them and show them the data, right, of the impact that they're doing. So an example I'll give you is when I was at Dell, we created like individual scorecards for every micro celebrity. And we looked at the scorecards. Yeah, we looked at the scorecards and we said, you're doing great, you're not doing well, so let us help you get these numbers back up, right? And then the more sophisticated thing is you actually tie their objectives to that. But providing person-level scorecards is a very powerful way to do that.
What did you score them on? Was it engagement with content?
It was things like, you guys are gonna hate this, clout. Yeah. I mean, clout's not sexy anymore, but like, it works. It's a good indicator. You do look at things like shares, whether people are reading the content, but more importantly, you guys are we're also data experts. You just look at the pipeline that they've generated, right, and where they've contributed to that, and whether they're getting the right type of customers and the right type of relationships that you want, and whether that's eventually leading to, again, it depends on the type of content they're creating, leading to actual pipeline. You can have the hard metrics of the pipeline, but then you can also have the little bit top of funnel type metrics, and then clout works too. I mean, it's not cool anymore, but it's a good barometer, or cred, or whatever your favorite one is that works.
So in the new world that you describe, how important or how relevant is the customer journey, or is it?
Critical.
Okay.
So the way you actually design your content is around both the persona, and you have to design that, and this is classic marketing strategy, and you have to know that persona inside and out, and then where they are in the journey, and you have to use the data to architect that 360 view and how you move them along the journey, and you hit them with the right content. So you should categorize your content by where they are in the journey, and obviously who they are. So that is as important as ever. Classic marketing hasn't changed, right? That is the fundamentals of everything you do.
So
Yeah.
along those lines, when you say a customer can't get enough of good content,
Yeah.
are you referring specifically to the customer? What about prospects with a
Yeah.
long buying cycle? Because they don't want to hear about dental insurance a few times a day.
Right. No. I meant like prospects, suspects. Suspects, people you don't even know who they are, as well as customers. I mean all of them. Again, it's you're going to hit them with very high-level, early-stage content if they're just doing research. But it's important to do that, right? That's what Amex did, right? They said, well, we know all small businesses are worried about managing inventory, so we're going to do a whole content series on that. None of them are customers. None of them are really looking for a credit card right now, but it's not that expensive to create the content and start to build that relationship with that customer, so that.
At what point do you fear alienating them because they just keep seeing your name in the inbox and they don't have time?
Well, I'm not talking about email, right? I mean, no, you do have. Yeah. I'm talking about if you create a content experience, if you're doing things in social, there's a whole bunch of different venues, physical events, right? Even less, you don't have to go digital, right? It's all those different areas. Typically, what I've seen as the best venue is an owned content site. That's very, that has very specific ability to personalize and all that kind of stuff, because they can come back when they want to come back, or they can use their own newsreader to follow you, and they can self-select whenever they want. That's what I've seen work best because of exactly what you said. You don't want to push them constantly, stuff that they don't want. But email still works. Yes?
Can you talk about the situation from B2B to B2C? Because a lot of our direct customers are dealers who are not very, you call it digital savvy. They're not on social, they're not on the web. So the way we sell to them is different, but our end consumer is probably on the web. So
Yep.
I mean, we have this dichotomy of the content that we need to, create for two ends of the customers, but our main customer is not that digital savvy. So can you talk about that?
So I think your question is essentially, what do you do with customers who are not digitally oriented?
Yeah, and
Right.
that's our intermediate one. Our end consumer
Right.
may be on the net. But
Right. So generally, even the most non-tech savvy customer knows how to go on the web, right? And so you can use your salespeople, you can use your non-tech channels to get people to an online content site, for example. They may not interact with you socially, they may not look at you in social, but they know how to read time on the web, or they know how to read content on the web. And so even doing something as basic as that, which most people know how to do, they're reading content on the web all the time, or they're searching in Google all the time. Typically that's a good way to get them in, and then again, the same economics apply. You just can't have the expectation that they're going to engage with you socially, or they may not be reading influencers, or they may not be doing things like that. Also, you can tie it to an offline experience, right? I mean, this is not just, you can create a whole, if you're a non-tech savvy audience, you can do a similar thing and create the whole thing in like a series of events, and then tie it to a digital and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of ways you can mix it for non-tech savvy customers. Yes, you can. Yes, so follow my personal handle, but also follow at DNB_US as no DNB US. Sorry, DNB US. Follow that as well. That'll have more broader content. What I post is more around what I just talked about, but DNB US will talk more about the data piece in addition to what I'm talking about as well. Well, thank you guys very much. Thanks for coming. Thank you.